Alright, so I'm going to give you guys a basic idea as to how to create a program. So all the information that you need is basically going to be in this chapter here, chapter 10.2. You can just basically go um, to the examples, and it's 3 different programming languages it has here. I think it's 3. No, it's 2. It has basic. We're not going to use basic, so you're going to look for the one that says programming language Pascal, and you're going to look at that example. And what you basically can do is recreate exactly what you're seeing. So this exact code here, I'm going to recreate it. So I'm going to explain to you each line, what each line does. So click this here. All of you have this programming, right? Should I have it?
No,
I think I sent it to you.
I'm getting it though.
Okay. You want me to send it or are you getting it?
I'm getting it.
Okay. So the very first line that you must have is this program line, and you're going to give a title followed by a semicolon. So in comment, I'm going to put title of program. So this very first line here is your program title. So just like your pseudocode had a title. So basically what you're doing is like if you're translating what was in your pseudocode into your program. So but remember, we cannot use space. So if there is a space required, you need to put an underscore or no space. So title underscore new, that's my title there. So the underscore is helping with that space. Now it's good to have space in your typing so that you can differentiate between different codes. So our next statement is going to be var. Var is equivalent to declaring your variables. So just like how in your pseudocode, the next step was to declare your variables. That's the purpose of var, to declare your variables. So I'm going to indent so that you can see it falls under that. So how do we declare? We put the name of the variable followed by a colon and then the data type, just like in your pseudocode. So name of variable, then semicolon, then data type. That is the structure of your declaration. Cost, there's a real, and class, there's a character. You guys follow me so far?
Yes, sir.
Liverpool?
Yes, sir.
So remember the first line is basically your title. The next few lines is the declaring of your variable. So begin is indicating the start of your program. So begin is the starting point of your program. So after begin now, what we're going to do is initialize. So if you notice in the code on the right hand, we have some initialize in there. So on the begin is where we are going to have our initializing. So if you notice, initializing is the variable followed by a semicolon equal sign, and then the value you are given that variable. So you can't put space, you cannot put space. If you don't want to put space, that's entirely up to you. It's just helpful to to read the information better when you add spaces. Good. So we're gonna put in a comment. Initializing of variables. So I would spell initializing correctly. Alright, so that's how you initialize a variable. You have three examples there of initializing. This is an example of initializing an integer, initializing a real data type, and initializing a string or a character. In this case, a character. If it was a string, it would just simply be typing in more characters. But because it's a character, remember it's only one character. String would have allowed more. So now we're gonna write our program, write the actual actions that's gonna be carried out. So write is indicating that we are writing something on the screen. So we're writing on the screen minimum age to obtain license colon space dot. So what we're basically doing here, we are outputting. So this is your output. So the next line, write ln. So open brackets, age, close brackets. This is incorrect. This is supposed to be without. Alright, we're gonna see how it runs, and then you guys will see the difference there. Write ln. Cost of drivers permits colon dot cost. So notice they have it correct there. And write ln class of vehicle license grade. And the program always has to end with an end and a period. So this is used to indicate the ending of the program. So end full stop is used to indicate the complete end of your program. End semicolon. Alright, so write is basically used to output something on the screen. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete all of this ln, and look what happens. So I'm going to compile this here. What is happening? Unknown identifier. Oh, I typed it wrong. Cost. No, they typed the wrong thing. It's supposed to be grade at the top here. So that could be a question on your paper. You gotta know what some of these commands, what some of the error messages might be. Unknown identifier basically means that a variable, we don't know what it is. So for example, I'm using this variable called grade, but I never declared it. Remember, declaration is how you tell the program what variable you're going to use. So you can't just go and use a variable and you never created it. You never told the program that you're going to use this variable. So unless you tell the program, unless you say that I'm going to use a variable called grade, you will not be able to use that variable. So that's how you're going to get unknown identifier. Are you guys clear on that?
Yep.
Good. So I'm going to change this class to grades. So notice it compiled successfully. So I'm going to run this now. Now notice what's happening here. Everything appeared in the same line. And that's because we use only write. So when you want the next line, the next code to appear in the next line, you need to put an ln. So please note that it doesn't put the current line of code into the next line. What it's actually doing, it's putting the cursor into the next line for the next code. So what we basically mean is that like how we have this cursor here blinking. So this is our cursor here. So let's imagine the word cursor is our cursor. So what it is doing when you use write, the cursor stays in that line. So that's like how you see the word cursor still inside of this line here. When you use write, it stays in the line. So whatever you continue to output is going to appear in that line. Now when you use a write line, when you use write ln, what it's going to do is going to put the cursor into the next line. So notice write line still appeared in the line before, but what it did, it put the cursor in the next line. So when you're going to write something now, it appears in the other line. Same for read line or read ln. It puts the cursor in the next line. So I'm going to do ln for everyone. Now you can put space before the brackets if you want also. That's up to you. So when you compile this and you run it, notice everything appeared in a different line. Let's say for instance you want some line of space between all of these instructions there. That is where we can use a simple trick where we create a write line and we basically put nothing inside of it. We create a write line whereby it's going to put the cursor into the next line, but because we left it empty, nothing will appear in that line. So we can do that for each one of them so that we have an empty line of space. Are you guys following so far?
Yep.
So notice we have our empty lines of space between each one of them there. Now notice that for our output, we have the word. So look at our first output. Our first output is a string of text. So minimum age to obtain license. So notice, so this is the rule. You can see this is the syntax. Just like how in English there's a syntax, in your foreign language, French, Spanish, there's a syntax. When you're creating a write line, there's a syntax. The syntax is that whatever you're gonna output has to be in brackets. It has to be in a bracket. So if you're gonna output a variable, notice it's in a bracket. If you're gonna output just some string of text, it has to be in a bracket. That's the first rule. Now, the next rule is that if you're gonna output a phrase, it has to be in quotation marks, single quotation marks. Let me see if double works. I don't think double works. Well, let's see. So double does not work. That might be a trick question in your exam, whether you can use double or single quotation mark. It's single that you'd have to use. So once again, if you have to output a line of text, you're going to use the single quotation mark. Now, so this here is an example of how you output, and this here is an example how to create a line of space. Now when you want to output a variable, And when you want to output what is inside of that variable, you cannot put it in quotation mark because notice in the output screen at the top, it outputted the word age, not the variable. So you need to take it out of the quotation mark and put it by itself. Because what basically happens is that whatever's in the quotation mark is what will appear exactly. So that is why for the right line, because we have nothing inside of it, nothing will appear inside of it. But say for instance, like if you want to add some design to your program, you could have actually put some like dashes like this here, and notice what's gonna happen. So notice some dashes appear here. So it adds some design to your program. So persons like some persons used to do that to add some layout, add some design and so on to their program. So maybe you guys can try that out. Alright, so notice now we have 18 because 18 is what is inside of this variable here. So we just outputted a variable and has a value of 18. So notice in this line here, so this here is an example of outputting text. This is a example of outputting a variable, and this is an example of outputting text and a variable. So notice the quotation mark once again. Notice the highlighted part, that's the quotation mark. Whatever is in the quotation mark, that's what exactly appeared on the screen. But notice right after the quotation mark is a comma, which separates the text from the variable. So if you want to continue adding more, you need to basically just put more commas, put more quotation mark, and type in whatever else you want, or put more comma and put in more variables that you want. So basically the commas are separated the different strings of text and variables and so on. Are you guys following so far?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, well, this here is another example of outputting text with a variable, and that's basically this entire program here. Notice this output here. Any idea why is this? Why we have this output like that? What is the data type of that variable? Anybody remembers? So this line of code here is outputting cost of drivers. So cost of drivers, and the variable is cost. So if we look at our declaration, it's a real. So what characteristic does a real data type have? What differentiates it from an integer? They're both numbers, but what's the difference? What's the difference between the two? Integer and real. No one? Quickly make a guess. This is something very simple that you guys are supposed to know. What's the difference between a real and an integer?
Does real have decimal places?
Yes, that is it. An integer, does it have any?
No.
No. So integers are basically a whole number, while real is a whole number with decimal places. So the reason why you're seeing this output like this here is because it is showing all of the decimal places. And this here is basically a way of shortening the decimal places. Now, um, the reason why it's showing all of the decimal places is because you have to tell it how many decimal places to show. So there's another keywords that you can add in when you output when you output this variable here, cost. You would add some expressions next to it, some like modifiers next to it to indicate that it's only going to output like maybe 2 decimal place, 3 decimal place, whatever the case may be. All right, are you guys clear on all that? Pascal. So using the same program, we could create an if. I'm just gonna put it more at the bottom here. If in bracket, if age, because age is already 18, so we're gonna check to see if age is greater than 16, and just like your pseudocode, you're gonna put then, and remember then is indicating true, so we're gonna say right line in brackets quotation mark the word true, close, then else, which is false, right line false. So that there is an example of creating your if. Just like your pseudocode, you have a test, but actually you don't need to put a semicolon here. This here is basically one long line of code that you're seeing here. If age greater than that, then whatever is underneath it, else and whatever is underneath there, that's one long line of code. That's why we don't put semicolons between, because we're basically going to break it if we put a semicolon between. So if you compile, notice it compiles successful. So we're going to run. So notice at the very bottom you have true, because age was in fact greater than 16. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this 18 now to 8, compile and run. So notice I now have false, because now it is not greater than 16, so it's going to go to this else here. With this if, when you're going to add more statements inside of this then and this else, you have to use begin and end. So begin to indicate the starting point. So like if I want to output multiple, if I want to do multiple stuff inside of this, this then part, this true, I need to separate it with semicolons. I need to indicate where each one ends. So in order to do that, I have to put it within a begin and an end. So begin and so compile and run. So notice I have 3 false here, and if I change it back to 18, compile and run, I now have 3 true. So that there is the layout. So begin and end indicates where the true statement is starting from, where it is ending. Same for the false here also. Alright, we're gonna close off here. Any questions before we end?
No, sir.